Είναι μεγάλη μας χαρά να καλωσορίσουμε στην Ελευσίνα και στη Συνάντηση Πολιτισμός 2030 το Goossens, καλλιτεχνικό διευθυντή του Φεστιβάλ της Μασσαλίας. Ο Γιάνν σπούδασε λογοτεχνία και φιλοσοφία στο Βέλγιο και στο Λονδίνο. Μετά την αποφοίτησή του έκανε πρακτική άσκηση στο Royal Theatre of La Monnaie υπό την καθοδήγηση του Gérard Mortier. Εργάστηκε ως δραματουργός και βοηθός του Peter Sellars και του Wim van der Gaebus, μεταξύ άλλων, στους τομείς του θεάτρου, της όπερας και του χορού. Έγινε καλλιτεχνικός διευθυντής του KVS, του Βασιλικού Θεάτρου της Φλαμανδίας το 2001 και κατά τη διάρκεια της 15ετούς θητείας του, το KVS έγινε ένα σημαντικός πολιτιστικός, πολυγλωσσικός και πολυεπιστημονικός οργανισμός για τη βελγική και τη διεθνή τέχνη, με ισχυρούς δεσμούς με δημιουργούς του Νότου και της Αφρικής. Το Μάιο του 2015 διορίστηκε διευθυντής του Φεστιβάλ της Μασσαλίας και έγινε γενικός διευθυντής του το 2016. Ήταν ο καλλιτεχνικός διευθυντής του Dream City 2017, ενός φεστιβάλ τέχνης που πραγματοποιήθηκε σε δημόσιους χώρους στην Τίνιδα της Τινησίας. Στο Φεστιβάλ της Μασσαλίας του 2017 και του 2018 παρουσίασε νέες δημιουργίες των Brett Bailey, Bruno Beltrao, Rimini Protocol, Fabrizio Castle, Alain Platel και άλλων. Το 2013 τιμήθηκε με το βραβείο της Ιθαγένειας από το Ίδρυμα PNV, το οποίο επιβραβεύει προσωπικότητες που αγωνίζονται για μια ανοιχτόμυαλη, δημοκρατική και ανεκτική κοινωνία. Το Μάιο του 2016, ο Γάλλος Υπουργός Πολιτισμού και Επικοινωνίας τον τίμησε με η διάκριση του υπότη των γραμμάτων και των τεχνών. Είναι λοιπόν μεγάλη χαρά που τον έχουμε μαζί μας να μας μιλήσει για το θέμα των φεστιβάλ, ένα θέμα κεντρικό στην Ευρώπη σήμερα αλλά και στην Ελλάδα. Και με αυτά θα περάσω το λόγο στον Γιάνν. So, Jan, welcome. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Kelly, for the introduction and for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will try and share with you a bit of a critical analysis of what is going on in today's European festival landscape in order to then dream about what could be a different and maybe a slightly better future. Let us reinvent our festivals. European arts festivals, however successful, are running out of steam and are all starting to look the same. They could draw inspiration from certain non-European neighbors, which might allow them to reconnect with their role as avant-garde drivers of creativity and civic emancipation. We are doing great, thank you. Once again, in 2018, major festivals in Europe are in fine form. In Brussels, Vienna, Amsterdam, Avignon, Athens, Berlin, there is one world premiere after another, media coverage is extensive, and VIPs and the general public show up at magical open-air venues and renowned local theaters. These festivals are the ideal platforms for prestige performances that bring enhanced visibility and political and media recognition to cities and regions. But haven't we lost something along the way? Whether we are talking about the major European festivals that emerged just after the Second World War, such as the Holland Festival in Amsterdam or the Festival d'Avignon, or more recent projects such as the Kunstenfestival des Arts in Brussels, their initial purpose was to combine artistic and social emancipation. The idea was for the arts to make an essential contribution to a fairer, more democratic societal space. Whether we are talking about Europe in ruins after 1945, or, for example, Brussels in a state of extreme tension in the 1990s, where Dutch speakers and French speakers lived together on the brink of sometimes even violent conflict. Wherever there was crisis and conflict, these festivals played a key role in creating shared spaces of solidarity, of exchange, and of democratic dialogue. It is not as if there is nothing left of this. Many European festivals still promote artistic innovation, imagination, and modest forms of social commitment or engagement. And yet, it is becoming hard to deny that the foundations have gradually shifted in another direction. In a neoliberal age, everyone is expected to fit in, to be consensual, and to be supportive of a dominant project for society. We've been hyped into a superficial cult of the so-called new, and often of the predominantly formal. And the more global you are, the better, even if it means completely losing sight of your local roots and your links with a local city context. We are expected to be engaged, to be politically committed in the very romantic sense of the word, but at the same time, we don't allow ourselves to really challenge fundamental political status quos. And ultimately, we might even be the first ones to endorse dominant views of art and society held, defended, protected by non-diverse, white, middle-class audiences, boards, and politicians. Festivals in European countries are often described by non-participating local citizens as UFOs, like the endless list of visual arts biennales that take place around the world. Of course, this word, the word UFO, with its alien undertones, has a touch of populism to it. And it is evident that we can never reach out to everyone and have everyone in our theaters. But it is also true that the way that arts programs, and especially festivals, have been internationalized over the past 30 years without much critical thinking and often too eager to seek out the exotic, that internationalization has made an increasing number of festivals look much the same. International uniformity has taken the form of a limited number of festival artists that we all together co-produce, which means that these festivals end up being little more than marketplaces for international co-productions that tour the world. Of course, this is not all bad. It is good for the artists involved, who can show their work on a large scale and in many cities. And it is interesting for educated and cultivated audiences who can discover what is new and happening on different continents. But it is really little more than fancy international shopping. In a world where a lot of theaters in major European capitals put international work on their programs all year round, we might wonder whether festivals should not be looking for a specific new identity that would allow them to return and to reconnect with their initial role as forces of emancipation. How can we focus on interactions between international artists and the contexts in which they come and work? How can we foster new creations that do not consider our great multicultural cities and their inhabitants as mere backdrops, as décors, and the audiences that they can find there as merely passive spectators? How can we instead see them as materials and sources of subject matter for these creations? How can we create the right conditions, methodologies, and economic parameters for artists to absorb the underlying characteristics of a particular area, a particular territory, a particular city over a long period, and use these characteristics to inform, to change, to let their artistic practices be transformed. How can the international co-productions that we program interact with these contextual creations and mobilize new spectators that might finally find reasons to identify with our festivals? Once again, when everything seems to be going well, these suggestions seem to be of secondary importance. And yet clear signals show that the current model for European festivals is running out of steam and merely confirms the artistic and political status quo. Audiences are often getting older and failing to diversify. Festival programs are becoming interchangeable and detached from the context of their host cities, and public authorities readily use cultural events to confirm their own projects, objectives, and ends. Things could be different, I think. With their rich history, their huge media profiles, their often still large audiences, many European festivals could adopt a bolder, more disruptive, and truly innovative artistic and political approach. They could once more become genuine avant-garde drivers of artistic creativity and civic emancipation. To achieve this, we might have to go back to the basics. We should give urban and multicultural frames of reference precedence over hollow, cliché-ridden, nation-centric mindsets. We should make the international dimension of festivals interact much more effectively with their local contexts. We should enrich the role of festivals in artistic creation to avoid getting stuck in a constant quest for novelty and to avoid making the question of finding, and to make the question of finding new audiences to fill our theaters a central concern. For festivals on several other continents, the idea of a shared national history that needs to be defended, of a uniform national identity that needs to be promoted, and of loyal audiences that need to be pleased is often much less prevalent. What kinds of new urban audiences can we mobilize? What future cities and multifaceted identities would we want to invent? These are the true challenges that we face, I think, and that festivals on other continents often manage to confront in more efficient ways. Instead of being content with shopping for international shows, we could draw more fundamental inspiration from a few examples down south. In Tunis, in the framework of Dream City, a methodology has been invented to allow artists to inscribe their work into the reality of the city. In Cape Town, Infecting the City does what its name suggests. It infects the city with new artistic practices and content. In Bamako in Mali, the young festival called Les Praticables sees an old neighborhood as much more than just a decor or a landscape. It becomes a fully fledged subject and its inhabitants become actors. And in Ramallah in Palestine, under construction is inventing a new cultural narrative for a society that's been under occupation for decades. In other words, there are independent initiatives that radically foster contextual creations drawn from ranks that are not controlled exclusively by the political establishment. And these initiatives, as I mentioned, can often be found outside Europe, so maybe we can have a closer look at one of them. Just going to have a sip. Let me briefly say a few words about Dream City the Festival of Art in the Old City or the Medina of Tunis, of which I did the artistic direction in 2017. Dream City was imagined and invented by the artists and choreographers Selma and Soufiane Ouissi in Tunis in 2007 as a response to a political and cultural context that was not beneficial to artistic creation in any kind of way. Both the political regime of dictator Ben Ali and the cultural landscape of big institutions run by local chiefs that only catered to their own needs did not allow for any kind of artistic experiment or adventure. Especially young artists could not find in Tunisian society any space of freedom, of artistic autonomy or political impact. Therefore, Selma and Soufiane Ouissi decided to organize an artistic coup d'etat. They publicly called for a march of independent artists through the streets of the Medina of Tunis, the oldest indigenous part of town, of which a small part is touristic, but of which the largest part is a microcosm of Tunisian society and its cultural, social, and political problems, and also opportunities. This initial march of 2007 was the stepping stone for the development of a rare festival that now happens every 2 years in Tunis. It is completely focused on new creations that are multidisciplinary and that are all developed in close exchange with a local, cultural, social, and political context and its populations. All of this contextual artistic work created by artists from Tunisia, from the Arab world and Africa, and some European artists. All of this contextual artistic work is shared with audiences during 5 days outside of the established cultural institutions and their black box or traditional performance spaces. Audiences are invited to walk the streets of the Medina, mainly during daytime, and see several works in one day. These works can happen in very diverse spaces and conditions, on the streets, in other public spaces, on rooftops, in old and deserted houses or Medina palaces, in shops, cafes, or private houses. Key to Dream City is the specific methodology that was developed and fine-tuned over a decade, and that is completely focused on creating an in-depth and long-term exchange between artists, both local and international, and their practices on the one hand, and an urban context, its populations, and cultural, social, and political contents on the other hand. Every edition takes 2 full years of preparation. Artists come to Tunis several times over the course of these 2 years. In the beginning for rather short trips that allow them to get to know the city, the Medina, to meet people, to spend time, quite simply, without thinking concretely about an artistic project, let alone a finality. 1 year before the actual festival, there is a 2-week collective residency, during which the intensity of the exchange with the local territory is reinforced. Artists are accompanied permanently by a very hands-on production team, a network of local urban, cultural, social, and political experts also. They then start to define more precisely the outline of the artistic creation they want to develop, and they have in-depth exchanges about these plans with the fellow artists. Over the next year, these works that can happen in very different disciplines, on totally different scales, with one performer or very large groups of performers or with no performers, with professionals, but also and mostly with non-professionals. Over the course of an entire year, these works get to be created through extended working periods. The key words are time, proximity, exchange, letting go of established positions, convictions, and habits. Dream City as a festival is an intense, ongoing negotiation to come to a 5-day shared space. between artists, their practices, a territory, its populations, and very diverse audiences. When it comes to these audiences, Dream City is a rare event too. It clearly gives good reasons to plenty of non-expert, non-professional audiences that don't frequent established cultural institutions or programs to identify with the festival and to come and take part in its creations. At the Marseille Festival that I've been directing since 2016, the challenge is a major and a different one. Rather than protecting a European festival heritage, there might be in Marseille a lot to learn from what was built and developed in Tunisia rather than the other way around. How to transform a European institution extremely connected to the local political establishment and its culturally homogeneous bourgeoisie, and for 20 years totally dedicated to showing existing work, safe work, no creations, in only one discipline, dance, and with a very thin connection to its local territory, despite the name of the festival, and with, in general, a very Western framework and approach in a city that on the level of its population is very connected to the global South. How to transform such a festival into something completely different, into a project that is dedicated to artistic adventure and risk, that is multidisciplinary at heart, and that most importantly sees its local territory not just as a series of cultural institutions or an easy and fashionable backdrop, but as an urban repertoire or archive for the festival's contents that will naturally and unavoidably connect the festival and the city of Marseille to the outside world, and especially to the world south of Marseille. This is a transformation that impacts fully and profoundly on all levels of the organization. Its team, its way of working, its board, its political ties, its artists and program, and last but definitely not least, its audiences. I would even say that the festival's audiences are a key point of attention. In the past, the festival filled seats and houses too, but the question was never asked, who is not here yet? Who does not have good reasons to identify with our program yet? Who in the city does not see herself or himself as a civic stakeholder of our event yet? One important notion in the transformation of the Festival de Marseille is the one of capital. Are we a capital? And if so, then which capital are we? Whose capital are we? Whom should we be a reference for? Marseille is France's second city and has a clear Paris complex. It does not want to be compared to the national capital, and at the same time Paris remains the eternal point of reference for any kind of cultural, political, or economic success. How to transform that? How to make the point that Marseille is a capital in its own right, but maybe not of France. How to make the point that Marseille needs to look south, to the Mediterranean region, to the Arab world, to sub-Saharan Africa, and maybe first and foremost, to France's overseas territories in the Indian Ocean and the Caribbean. In Marseille, there are more citizens that are of Comorian origin, named after the island group in the Indian Ocean between Mozambique and Madagascar. There are more Marseille citizens of Comorian origin than on the Comore Islands themselves. In the city's northern areas, the Quartier Nord, the infamous Quartier Nord, a majority of the young population does not have Franco-French origins. Very many of them grew up in a West African or Central African cultural framework on the territory of Marseille. What does that mean for our program, for our creations, for the contents and aesthetics we need to be presenting and producing? How can we put in place interesting confrontations between international reference artists, their practices, and this specific cosmopolitan urban context? How can we turn Marseille into a capital of the South that is to France what Miami is to the United States, a capital in its own right, not of North America, but of the Caribbean and Latin America? Of course, a cultural project and a festival cannot pull off such a transformation all by themselves, but our role and mission is to show the way, to be precursors, to offer a mental map to the city that imagines a horizon that we can all together aim for. When I travel to Cairo, to Bamako, to Tunis, or of course to Algiers, or to Mayotte in the Indian Ocean, the French reference city is Marseille, not Paris. It is about time for Marseille to live up to that ambition and to integrate it into its cultural and political imagination. I'm almost done. For the Festival de Marseille, such a starting point means completely redefining its artistic project. The ambition is no longer to offer beautiful French or Western dance production that confirm a national or Western cultural repertoire or identity. The point is to project ourselves into a future and to come with projects that give us an idea of what a common future and maybe even some sort of common identity might look like in a city where we all know that its citizens do not share a common past. When it comes to a European cultural capital for the future and the role a festival can play in that, the crucial question seems to be, how can we be really meaningful locally, be fully connected regionally, and still be in dialogue with a larger European horizon? Just as in Tunis, the ambition to inscribe European and international artistic practices into a local cultural territory could be very pertinent. Just as in Marseille, the questions which capital we want to be, for whom and with whom, and of which worlds we want to be a center seem urgent to respond to. And last but not least, there is the question which Europe we want to be a capital of. Is it a Europe obsessed with what we think was a common past? Is it a Europe obsessed with building walls, with retreating into ever smaller frameworks of cultural and political references? Or is it a Europe that remains open and inconclusive and time and again projects itself into the future, a future that should be an open and shared space of solidarity and exchange, in which identity is nothing more than a construction that we have to redefine every day. Walls turned sideways become bridges. That might be an interesting notion to keep in mind for our festivals and European capitals of the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jan. And actually, originally, I was thinking to open up for questions, but I think with all the questions that you have posed, we are maybe ready now to go in the working groups and discuss all these questions. I think we need days and months to work on the issues that you have raised. So, thank you very much. Και νομίζω ότι με αυτό με όλα αυτά τα ζητήματα που έθεσε στο τραπέζι και άνοιξε ο Goossens, μπορούμε να προχωρήσουμε στις ομάδες εργασίας, όπου θα τα συζητήσουμε αναλυτικότερα στις διαφορετικές ομάδες εργασίας.